So next up, we're going to have a look at your persona. A big part of how we come across is visually, because we're going to be layering that on top. Because if you remember from the first thing, we don't have the social history with our audience. So a big part of that is that we've got to give it to them and help them understand us much quicker. And we can do that through accessing what's called persona. So what is persona? So persona is this idea from psychology. So this is the more base version of persona, which applies to everyone. It was come up with by Carl Jung. Now, Carl Jung says that whenever... So you can see here this little diagram here. And he says that when you're with a group of people, when you're with basically anyone else, you don't become yourself anymore. And that's not to say that you become like a liar, but you become this projected version of yourself. So he says that you basically put on a persona. And an example of when you may have gone into persona is when you've gone for a job interview and you want to present a certain aspect of yourself. And what happens is those aspects of yourself that are not necessarily considered favourable in this situation go into what he calls the shadow. Okay? So you're not lying. I mean, maybe you are if you're saying I've never overslept in my life. But you're not lying. You're just presenting a certain aspect of yourself, and you're hiding certain aspects of yourself which go into the shadow down here at the back. And another example of when you might have gone into persona or felt persona is when, if you've ever had like different groups of friends that you kind of feel like you act in certain ways in front of, and then say there's a party coming up, and I don't know, say you've got a bunch of goth friends and a bunch of cowboy friends. I don't know why I said cowboy friends, but say that is the case, right? You've got a bunch of goth friends, you've got a bunch of cowboy friends, and you're like, oh my god, the goths and the cowboys are going to be at the same party. How am I possibly going to, like, how do I act, right? And that is an example of when you have projected a certain aspect of your persona and it's gone into the shadow in two different scenarios, and you've got to go, okay, I have to acknowledge that there are certain ways that I act in certain or don't act in certain scenarios that can be in conjunction. Now, when you're on stage, you've got all these people watching you, and we will naturally, without even thinking about it, stick on a persona. So knowing this, we can lean into it and exaggerate certain aspects of ourselves in order to make our material land better, in order to make that social connection a little bit easier. We have to ask ourselves, who are you? You know, who do you want to present yourself as? And there is a natural, and it feels a little bit uncomfortable at first, but there is a natural flattening process that will happen when you're on stage, and that is because of the persona. Certain aspects of yourself go into the subconscious. You need to ask yourself, who do I want to portray myself as? You know, that can be, if you can make it as realistic and as authentic as you can, all you have to do is go, this would help me for comedic purposes. And if it's going to help you to say, oh, I work in a car wash, and you've never worked there before, if it's funny, it doesn't really matter. Part of the reason why we want to do this, part of the reason why we want to give a persona, is because there was a study done about how much information we give off, and it turns out that 55% of our information that we give off is in body language, and 38% of it is in tonality, and 7% of it is in the words that we say. When we as comics start developing material, and when we start to craft everything, I find that we focus mainly really on the words that we say. So we're focusing on 7% and ignoring the other 93%. So, I mean, to some extent, we're doing the 7%, and then once we've kind of got the words down, we might then start to work on tonality. But still, a lot of people do end up ignoring that body language. And if you can kind of boil down what you do in order to give it off a little bit easier, then I would recommend that you do that. It helps with that social grace, and it helps for people to just take on board everything that you are saying just a little bit easier because of that psychology. We want to be able to read people. We want to be able to understand people. People go to comedy nights because they want for people to do well. They want to be having a good time. They want that social connection. So if we can meet them halfway, or even a little bit more than halfway, it's going to make your job easier. So when you start developing your material and going, okay, we're going to start taking this out there, think to yourself, am I kind of underplaying this 55% visual language, body language that people are going to be reading? And I'm not necessarily saying, go out there with a spinning bow tie and a cummerbund or anything like that. But if you can, if you can boil down what it is about you or what you do, to make it a little bit easier to just people read these visual signs, it's within your interest to do that. So here's some exercises that you can have a look at in terms of helping to develop your persona, which is, first of all, think about perspective. You might think to yourself, okay, well, there's lots and lots of things about my identity that I want to be able to try and put across. You might want to go, okay, I might want to talk about my job. I might want to talk about my background. I might want to talk about my gender, sexuality. I might want to talk about my background. I might want to talk about my schooling, my growing up, that kind of thing, what my culture is. And if you have a look at what you're developing and go, okay, if I apply that mindset or I apply that lens to this joke that I'm writing, I might just be able to create either a new joke, a new punchline, or I might actually be able to heighten it through the persona. So an example might be, so I went to this is true, I went to the worst school in the UK. Again, genuinely true. Had a 20% pass rate, which means that 3/4 of kids can't do maths. So what I've done there is I've gone, okay, I want to do things about my schooling, about my background. I've thought of that is a genuine fact about my growing up and the school that I went to, and then it's like, okay, well, let's add a punchline on there. Okay, if I went to a really bad school, there's a good chance that I'm also going to have come away with bad grades. So I've like messed up one of the facts that I'm giving you. So exercises, again, you might want to have a look in the mirror or take some pictures. Try playing around with costumes, makeup, stances, facial expressions, because all of this can either add to or take away from what it is that you're trying to put across. So for you to be able to see how it's coming across and be able to make little alterations will only be useful. And what you want to do is go, can I be authentic? Now, I know I said before that, I don't know if you want to explain that you're like a car mechanic. Like, absolutely do, right? And that's not what I necessarily mean about authenticity. It's absolutely fine to be a car mechanic when you've not been a car mechanic. Say if you're really useless with, like DIY projects, and that's like a true thing for you, you can go, okay, well, I could say I'm a car mechanic and then use all this stuff that I have anxiety around, using my hands and DIY projects, and intersperse that into my script that I'll develop. Think what rings true for you and have a look at kind of linking that in, because I mean, you could even start to develop that and then go, well, do you know what, actually I've got enough stories about DIY and about failed projects that I've done around the house, the time that shelf fell over, the time that I couldn't put a shed together. Then it's like, well, do you know what, I might actually be able to drop the mechanic thing and just do it about me not being very good at DIY. So try and make it authentic in some way, and you'll generally find that there'll be much more avenues for you to go down in terms of your material, in terms of what it is that you want to be presenting